Hello, this is Lee Cooper, and this is my case study for Module 14, Internet Use Violations. Here we go. So, Category 1, what is the problem, and how can we have an analysis of that? So, what do we know? Some of the things we know, Miss Tate is a first-year teacher. She has high standards for her class. She's been making waves among students due to the rigor of her course, and it's created kind of a stressful environment. We know that an unknown number of students, or a group of students, that have been posting nasty comments on her on a Facebook page, is from what it looked like. We know that one of the comments said, "Who wants Miss Tate to disappear?" And Miss Tate was convinced that someone was going to kill her. Dr. Smith believes that this is a prank, but we are investigating. So, what do we still need to know? Well, we need to know who took part in the messages. We need to know who wrote the comment about Miss Tate disappearing. Partly the reason that we need to know that is because we need to know what did they mean by this. Obviously, Miss Tate took this as a threat towards her life, and being able to talk to that person and having that as like a serious conversation of like, what did you mean by this? Because, hey, this can be misconstrued, right? Like helping them to kind of understand the weight of those words. All right, so what else do we need to know? I would say some other things we need to know, kind of aside from the actual case, right? Like figuring out that information would be what supports are in place for first-year teachers, because this is more towards that solution-oriented. Have students had any formal education with things like digital citizenship? Is there a curriculum for that? As well as social and emotional learning. Is there any kind of curriculum for that? So SEL learning. All right, so what is the actual problem that's going on here? Well, I think that there's two main problems here. One, there's a lack of responsibility that is kind of going around with the students, and they do have, right, kind of like the expectation that the teachers are going to definitely meet the needs of those students in maybe an unhealthy way, right? Like if they're challenged in a way, it's something that they are kind of like being, I guess, right, they're kind of like being down about, they're making excuses for, and they're going towards kind of like this darker side of like, let's like get this person out of here, those kinds of things, instead of just being like, hey, this is tough, life is tough, I need to accept this responsibility. So there's that lack of responsibility going on. The other part would be digital citizenship. So again, is there any kind of digital citizenship training that has gone on, or like what can we do to ensure that these things don't happen in the future? So that is also a problem. And then there's going to be some kind of a rift between Miss Tate and the students. So regardless of whether or not you solve the case and the student is punished, like Miss Tate is obviously upset. And how are we going? So that is a problem. And how are we going to kind of mend that rift between the students and Miss Tate? Okay, so proposed plan of action and strategies for implementation. So first thing, clarity. Right, we got to investigate the case at hand. So who was it that was writing the things? What was it that was there being said? What did they mean by it? Why were they writing these things? I mean, we kind of got that reason why, but why did they say the thing like disappear? What was the thing behind that? And then also, I think something that is kind of important here is where were these things taking place? Was this taking place in school? Was this taking place outside of school? I think that we can run into some issues of the idea of like, the students' freedom of expression, those kinds of things versus, right, like the well-being of other students, well-being of the school, and having like that operation running. So I think that there could be something there. So I think, like, did this take place at school? What is kind of that jurisdiction? But I'll kind of address that later on. And again, the whole idea here is like, once we can figure out what's going on in the situation, hopefully that can bring some clarity to Miss Tate, and that's going to help her to feel less anxious. I think right now our biggest thing is she doesn't know what's going on. She just sees that this is happening. She's kind of freaking out, right? And she thinks that people are trying to kill her, but it's like, well, let's figure out what's actually going on, and hopefully that can help to curb her anxiety. Okay, so part A, action plan, restore. How are we going to make these things right? So I think that, right, coming at it from some type of a restorative practice, so that means like we're bringing in the parent, the student, the teacher, the principal to have a meeting. And as the principal, being able to facilitate that meeting to where the student knows what happened, the parent knows what happened, the teacher is able to express themselves, and we're able to kind of collaborate together to come up with a good solution. So, right, really looping everybody in, and the solution, right, is again going to be more towards restorative versus punitive. So one, like we're restoring by taking down the posts, like those things need to go away. And then the second part is, as far as like what is the consequence towards the student, it should be something that's community service oriented, that will serve Miss Tate or the school. So I don't know exactly what that would be, right? Like without more information, but maybe that like what is a need that Miss Tate has? Let's say that, helping set up or take down experiments, or something like that, helping after school to clean the science lab equipment, something like that, right? Like how can they serve Miss Tate, and also possibly build a relationship with her? So how can we have that restorative practice there? Okay, and then I also would think like, a formal apology is definitely at hand here. Something that is sincere, something that Miss Tate feels like, okay, I feel as though you are genuinely sorry for what happened, and like it's not just like, sorry, right? Like it's a genuine thing. So I think that that's also important. Okay, so category 2, part A. Well, sorry, and I just had that thought too. With that formal apology, right, like how do you get that to happen? I think, right, you have to be able to really convey to the student, and from the teacher's perspective, the parent's perspective, and the principal's perspective, why what they did was wrong, and really like help that student to understand why what they did was wrong. And I think that's how you're going to get that more sincere formal apology. Okay, so how are we going to build/rebuild? So a little bit more with that action plan. So I think connecting Miss Tate with an experienced teacher, so some kind of a mentor, to where they can share past experiences, they can share what they did in different situations, right? Like really helping her along as a professional, as a teacher. How can we build Miss Tate up? Another part too, as far as building support for Miss Tate, some kind of a first-year teacher acknowledgement. I know when I was a first-year teacher last year, it was really cool. Well, I mean, we did this thing where we had like a get-together, and everyone kind of shared their first-year teacher experience. Like, what was your worst first-year teacher experience, right? And I think that, helping her to understand that it's like, hey, these things sometimes happen, and, like, you can't take it that personally. And just helping her to, I guess, like, understand that, she's not the only one, and, kind of help her to be less of a victim in the situation. And also encourage team building. So how is it that other teachers can be supporting Miss Tate to be the strongest teacher that she can be, and therefore helping the school, and therefore helping the students. Student support. I think that, right, like obviously, like she is a very competent person when it comes to actually knowing the knowledge and those things. So I would say some type of student letters or encouragement. So yeah, giving those to her and making her feel good that there are students who do value her, because I'm sure that there are. And then lastly, admin support, so providing coaching for sure. How is it that we're going to make sure that Miss Tate can cultivate, like how can we cultivate her knowledge and high expectations that she has? Okay, and then as far as like having a larger net, so how are we going to make sure that these things do not become worse or become bigger in the future? I think some type of digital citizenship curriculum rollout, like students know like what the expectations are, and like we're teaching responsibility, and we're teaching responsibility also like through things like the use of the internet. A digital citizenship curriculum that I saw was at like commonsense.org. That would be an example. I would also say social and emotional learning among the school. So how is it that we stand up to things like bullying? How is it that we can be good citizens among our school, and part of that with that social emotional piece? How do we deal with stress of classes, right? I mean, that's huge. So another website, secondstep.org, was something that I did see some things there that could be helpful. Build in formal first-year teacher support. So again, like moving forward, making sure these things don't happen. How can we best support first-year teachers? All right, so implementation strategy. I think as far as the clarity goes, right, we need to have some kind of investigation of the tech. That was something that was already being said. Like, we need to actually figure out where these things are coming from. I think one-on-one student conversations, once we kind of figure out who's involved with this, you're bringing in students individually, and you're having these conversations to try to get to the bottom of things. Communication with parents, that's for all of these students, like, hey, there was a situation that was going on, and right, really having that collaborative process, and like making sure the parents understand what's going on, what you can do as a school, what the parents would do at home, like really collaborating. I think that's a big part of that. Okay, restoring. So part of that action plan, I think direct and open communication is really key here. Definitely among, with Miss Tate, I think for her, again, the thing is like the unknown. She doesn't know what's going on. So how can we have direct and open communication? Everybody's on the same page, like we're figuring things out and we're bringing clarity. It's not just this chaos and this anxiety. for the build and rebuild. So I think, yeah, like owning the situation, that's on my part as the principal. Like, what am I doing to, like this happen? How can I take ownership of this? How can I make sure these things don't happen in the future? That's really kind of that like idea behind that. And then lastly, how can we make this community oriented? How are we building our school community? That's kind of the strategy, or kind of like the goal behind that, right? To have that build and rebuild. All right, so just kind of put like a problem cycle in here. Again, kind of make the idea of problem definition. We've seen this before. So as far as like a larger net, again, right, we're trying to figure out larger solutions here. So the school, we need to kind of do an analysis of the school, I would say, like where are our faults? How can we make them better? So collaboration with stakeholders. Again, bringing in the students, the teachers, the parents, like how are we going to make this school better? What are the faults that we have? Like how are these things like happening, and how can we make sure they don't happen? And then, right, like so we're analyzing what we gathered and adjusting kind of our plan from there. Again, keep your vision on the main goal. So how are we keeping students safe? How are we making sure that everyone feels welcome in that school? Everybody like is there, they want to be there, and it's a mutually beneficial thing for all. So I think, yeah, develop more objective and tangible goals kind of as we go along based on the needs of the school. Okay, so resolving the issue, category 3. So how am I making sure that I'm serving all students with this plan? So stronger teachers means, well, that we also have a stronger professional learning community, right? Like if we have a strong teacher base, this is huge. I'm kind of basing this off of the National Policy for Board of Education Administration and their leadership standards. So again, the plan kind of touches on ethics and cultural responsiveness. So how are we building these things in to where they're not happening again? And how are we dealing with the situation at hand, making sure that we're being fair and ethical? I'm also talking about family engagement and collaboration. That's a big part. Community of care. We are making sure that the teacher feels welcome. We're making sure that we're kind of, I am making sure that we're kind of like building that relationships back, the rift that was caused, helping, bringing in students to show her like, hey, like you are important. And again, like school improvement, that is also a piece of this as well. We are improving the school by doing all of these things. And just to kind of bring you like an image from that I was talking about, the National Policy Board for Education Administration, those standards, right? Like if we are meeting these standards, which I mentioned a lot of them, it is leading to student learning. So I just wanted to include that as well. Okay, so justification. Based on this case, why is it that I did the things that I did? And right, so here we go. There's no clear evidence of digital citizenship or social emotional learning. That wasn't anything that was mentioned, so I think that's something that can always be useful at a school and like can help to prevent problems. I think that there is a need for digital citizenship, like obviously, or like maybe it wasn't delivered in the most effective way, or those kinds of things. Which, right, you're still going to have things fall through the cracks, but it seems like this is something that could happen to the school. A need for social emotional learning. Again, these students, like, how is it that we're dealing with if something comes across, if we have difficulties, how can we deal with our problems in a more effective way and in a way that is going to be not destructive to the school, right? So teaching those students how to deal with having a tough teacher or having, like those kinds of things, like how do we have that social emotional piece in there? Need for teacher support and coaching. Obviously, right, with that first year teacher, how can we best support her to make sure that, again, these things don't happen? Need for responsibility. So again, among the students, that's kind of evident, is that like they definitely push themselves, those kinds of things, but how can they take it upon themselves? Like, I need to be a more responsible person. How can they best support that teacher as well? I mean, how can the students ensure that they are, being welcoming to their teacher? So, right, like just kind of building in that culture of responsibility. And right, I already kind of mentioned that. Here we go. Feelings and unresolved problems. So what is kind of unresolved here? My opinions of the case. So in general, I did like the case. I think, kind of that idea of going from this chaotic state, like the teacher is like, oh gosh, like, students want to kill me, and okay, how can we bring this into an area of order? How can we make sure what's going on here and kind of bring clarity to everything? So that's always, right, anytime that we're kind of cleaning these things up and we can make things better, those are always good. And then the psychology of Miss Tate, it was kind of fun to think about, and how it is that you could help somebody like that, to teach them to be brave and to kind of show them that there is support around them. Leadership principles. as I was going through this, I was thinking about myself as a leader and how is it that I want to lead. I want to do that through a lot of ownership, right? If something's going on, what am I doing what am I doing or not doing? How can I make this better? How is this on me? So showing that humility. And then again, in like an opportunity to grow, we can grow as a school. I can grow as a person, and I'm learning and growing by being able to do this. So these are the things that I was kind of thinking about as I was going, and it was fun to do. I really like doing these case studies that I have done so far. Okay, moving on. And then communication, collaboration. That's also kind of a key piece about how I want to be as an administrator, and that's something I tried to bring into this case. Okay, so unresolved issues. I think, how will Miss Tate respond? Like, she was obviously pretty upset. She wasn't convinced when the principal said, like, hey, I think that this is a prank. She still said, I'm going to go stay with my parents, which it said was like a 3-hour drive away. She's obviously still very upset. So how is she going to respond? And how are we going to actually, teach her to be brave and convince her that, it's okay? Again, like, what is the digital citizenship at the school? What is needed? How do we promote responsibility? What is needed there? What's going to be the parent reaction, right? Like, and I'm kind of thinking about this image here. If you have these like helicopter parents, you have they're coming in and they just are really fighting for their student. And they're like, no, my student can do no harm, right? Like, that obviously can cause some issues. How hard is it going to be to get those parents on board with the action plan that I have? And then also, again, I kind of mentioned, is there a freedom of expression issue going on here? So school function versus the privacy of the students, like, I think, right, like a student in some regards, like they should have the ability to express themselves and express if they have like a teacher that they don't like. But obviously if it's getting to a point where it's like kind of, right, where a teacher doesn't feel safe and where it's getting to this point where it's really like, I guess nasty, right? When you get to that point, like where does that line kind of draw? And I think that could be something that you run into, but right, like there has to be some kind of consequence for the action. And we do need to be doing a better job to make sure that we're teaching responsibility for these students. Okay, so serving all students through strong staff and strong students. Moving forward, how did I show integrity during this as the principal? So how to use the educational leader, promote the academic success of every student by acting with integrity. I think owning the problem, right? It's like, hey, this is something that I can fix here. So I'm going to be honest with this. I have some fault in this. So maybe I'm not providing the best first-year teacher support. Maybe our school doesn't have the best digital citizenship. And maybe we need to do a full school analysis to figure out where the things that we need to improve on this school. So owning the problem, I think, is really huge there. How am I also promoting the academic success with fairness? Okay, so in the actual case, right, there was a lot of communication and a lot of collaboration. It's bringing everybody together, and it's kind of figuring out what is the best plan. It's not just, me making decisions and kind of like dropping, I guess, judgment and those kinds of things. It's, okay, how can we collaborate and make sure that everybody feels like there's a good outcome? Consequences that were implemented, right? There is some kind of restorative thing that has to happen. Posts are being taken down, apology has to happen, and there's going to be some kind of community service for that student. Better support for all first-year teachers. Again, part of my plan is to do that. So that is providing, not just support for her and this situation and just trying to mend this, but it's like, okay, how are we going to do this across the board? And that promotes fairness for that school. And also teach teachers in general. How can we best support our teachers and make sure that they can do the best job that they can? All right, and lastly, how am I promoting the academic success of every student? By acting in an ethical manner. So I did take a restorative approach. I think that's huge. And it is kind of like, it's not punitive, and it's not, just being like, look, Miss Tate, you need to get over this, and not doing anything about it either, right? Like, it is making sure that there's accountability for the student, and that also there is support for Miss Tate and making sure that she feels welcome, those kinds of things. So definitely like pushing that restorative approach, I think, is acting in an ethical manner. The other part's digital citizenship curriculum. By pushing that, right, like we are teaching our students how to be more ethical. So it's not just even me being ethical, it's how are we being ethical kind of as a team. Like, how are we all playing a part in that business of ethics? So promoting and modeling ethics, I think, is huge there. And then also that social emotional piece, right, that kind of goes along with that. Just teaching that responsibility and teaching how are we being good to each other and serving each other and having an effective school. So Yeah, that's what I had for this case study. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, it's been a good class.